A young woman lost her life in 1975. The case unfortunately went cold, but with the help from witnesses coming forward and DNA advancements, the breakthrough came nearly 50 years later. On August 6, 1975, 17-year-old Laurel Jean Mitchell disappeared after leaving her job at the Epworth Forest Church Camp Snack Bar in North Webster, Indiana. She was supposed to meet friends at an amusement park about a half-mile away. One witness told the police he had seen Laurel walking and had waved to her shortly after when she would have left work. Laurel was never seen alive again. Her body was found the next day, on August 7th, in the Elkhart River by some fishermen after she failed to return home. Although Laurel's cause of demise was ruled as drowning, the police said that the autopsy report suggested that she had fought for her life, so police initiated a slaying investigation. Two people who lived near the road Laurel would have been walking on after her shift at work told the police that they heard a loud car go by, turn around, and then stop near their home. One of those people told the police that he heard what sounded like someone slamming the trunk of a car shut. When he stepped outside, he saw two cars leaving the area. The other resident told the police that at around 10 p.m., a car turned around in the driveway next door, and as it came back by her house, she heard several voices say, "Let's get," or "Let's get her." She said the car was very loud and dark in color. Even though the detectives followed up on these leads, no arrests were made and the case went cold. Then in 2013, a detective with the Noble County Sheriff's Department was contacted by a woman in Florida who told him that in 1975, when she was 16, she dated a man named John Wayne Lehman. The two had gone to a party, and when driving her home, Lehman admitted his involvement in a crime that he had committed with his friend Fred Bandy. In 2014, the investigators interviewed a man who said that when he was a sophomore at West Noble High School in 1975, Fred Bandy had told him that he had committed the crime. Another person also came forward to say Bandy had admitted to the crime at a party. In 2019, Laurel's clothing was resubmitted to the Indiana State Police Laboratory Division for examination and DNA testing. A DNA sample was taken from Bandy in late 2022, and it showed he was 13 billion times more likely to be the contributor of the DNA on Laurel's clothing than any other unknown person. Finally, after almost 50 years, in February 2023, the police arrested 69-year-old Fred Bandy and 69-year-old John Wayne Lehman. Their arrests were made possible by advancements in lab technology that allowed the investigators to connect both men to Laurel's demise. The investigators believe Bandy and Lehman grabbed Laurel and put her in Bandy's 1971 Oldsmobile. They then took her to the Mallard Roost public access site on County Road 600 North in Noble County, where they drowned her. Both men steered clear of the law and trouble for the next nearly 5 decades. Bandy, however, was convicted of crimes multiple times in Noble Circuit Court throughout the years, which allowed the investigators to gather his DNA. Lehman appeared via video from the Miami Correctional Facility for his sentencing hearing after previously pleading guilty to a count of conspiracy to commit slaying in connection with the demise of Laurel. As part of Lehman's sentencing, he was given 613 days credit for time already served. Lehman said in an August deposition that Bandy assaulted Laurel and drowned her. Lehman denied participating in the assault or the slaying, and said his fear of Bandy kept him from trying to stop the crimes. On October 11, 2024, he received an 8-year prison sentence for his role in the girl's demise. Bandy was found guilty of slaying in connection to the demise of Laurel. On October 22, 2024, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole for the 1975 slaying of 17-year-old Laurel. In 2004, a man fatally shot Corey Devon Smith in his mother's driveway. 20 years later, while behind bars, a man finally confessed to the slaying. On June 12th, in 2004, 21-year-old Corey Devon Smith was fatally shot near 2766 Royal Palm Avenue in Fort Myers, Florida, in front of his mother's house. After grabbing a charger from his home, Corey was shot 5 times on the way to the car, leaving him to succumb to his injuries on the ground. Corey's body was found in the street in front of the home. Witnesses said that a black man in a mask was seen running away from the area and getting into a yellow Cadillac sedan. Dedicated cold case investigators were working tirelessly to close the case on who took the life of Corey. Forensic examination of Corey's car revealed 2 distinct sets of DNA. The first person was not contacted in 2004, and the second has yet to be identified. After revisiting the scene of the crime, the police believe the shooter waited for Corey, shot him, hid in the bushes, and then fled the scene. Over the years, the Fort Myers cold case detectives started building leads, but the detectives did not have enough evidence, which then led to the case going cold. They also believe that they know who the driver of that car was. The detectives said that it was just a matter of connecting those dots and presenting it to the state attorney's office. While looking through cases from that time, the investigators realized that they had enough evidence to potentially find a suspect in Corey's case. With renewed attention and more exposure, the Fort Myers police detectives believes that they may be able to crack this case wide open. In 2022, the Fort Myers Police Department investigated a case involving a friend of Corey, Rodney Terrell Davis. The state attorney's office's cold case slaying unit and the Narcotics Enforcement Task Force, also known as NetForce, also worked on the case. Davis was then arrested as the result of the NetForce investigation. He had been caught arranging narcotics trafficking deals from the Lee County Jail, where he was being held on other charges. Davis was charged with multiple counts of conspiracy and 1 count of trafficking illegal substances. During the investigation, Davis agreed to provide law enforcement with information about his involvement with the 2004 slaying of Corey Smith. Davis then gave a statement to law enforcement, admitting to being the shooter who ended Corey's life. Due to the cold case slaying being able to be closed, the defendant pleaded guilty to the illegal substance charges and was sentenced on both cases. On October 22, 2024, 41-year-old Rodney Davis of Cape Coral was sentenced to 40 years in prison for second-degree slaying with a firearm for taking Corey's life. He was also sentenced to 15 years in prison on the illegal substance charges. A family can have closure after a cold case was solved 20 years after it happened. In 1980, a woman was slain after being kidnapped from a Port Huron neighborhood in Michigan. Decades passed with no justice in sight, until DNA testing led to the arrest of 2 suspects. On November 2, 1980, 21-year-old Karen Umphrey was found deceased in the state game area of Beards Hills, Michigan, near Port Huron, with 2 gunshot wounds to her head. The investigators were able to collect DNA evidence from Karen's body after she was found by hunters, a day after witnesses reported seeing her being forced into a vehicle. The identity of the person responsible for Karen's demise was not known, and despite investigators' attempts to identify the perpetrator, the case went cold. The case was cold for more than 4 decades, although investigators never gave up and continued their pursuit to identify the person responsible for Karen's demise. In 2022, the Michigan State Police submitted forensic DNA evidence from the crime scene to Umphrey. A comprehensive DNA profile belonging to an unknown contributor was developed by Umphrey, and forensic genetic genealogy was used to develop new investigative leads in the case. Thanks to these new leads, the Michigan State Police, along with the St. Clair County Sheriff Department, the investigators were able to identify 70-year-old Douglas Laming of Fort Gratiot, Michigan, as a suspect in Karen's slaying. Laming was arrested on December 15, 2023, and was charged with first-degree slaying. At the time, it was not publicly announced that DNA belonging to another contributor was discovered at the crime scene. In 2023, the Michigan State Police submitted the additional forensic DNA evidence from the 1980 crime scene to Umphrey. A second DNA profile belonging to the second unknown suspect was developed using forensic-grade genome sequencing. Othram's in-house forensic genetic genealogy team used the genealogical profile to produce new investigative leads. The leads were returned to the Michigan State Police, who continued their investigative work with the St. Clair County Sheriff Department officials to identify the second suspect in the slaying of Karen. This follow-up investigation led to the identification of the second suspect, 63-year-old Anthony Harris. Harris was 20 years old at the time of Karen's slaying. St. Clair County Sheriff Matt King said, "This is a great example of the fact that we preserve this evidence through the years, use it sparingly, and test it several times." Harris was arrested on February 6, 2024, at work, and the next day, on February 7th, Harris was arraigned and charged with open slaying in Port Huron's 72nd District Court for his alleged involvement in the demise of Karen. Harris's bond was set at $2 million. He pleaded guilty to second-degree slaying in October 2024 and then testified against his accomplice, Douglas Laming. Sheriff King said, "This was a huge step in our case and the first point to getting closure for the family." Investigators said that Harris confessed to forcing Karen into Laming's truck one night in November 1980. He reportedly said that they took Karen to the St. Clair County State Gaming area, where he and Laming assaulted her. Harris told investigators that he walked away for a moment and heard 2 gunshots, but claims it was dark, so he did not actually see Laming pull the trigger. Laming's trial began on October 8, 2024. During the course of this trial, family, along with the community, was shown the details of the evidence collected through the years. The trial gave jurors the opportunity to hear statements, often conflicting, from both Laming and Harris. The senior prosecuting attorney, Amy Goodrich, presented a compelling case against Laming. After 3 days of trial, the jury was sent to deliberation and after an hour returned with the guilty verdict. Sheriff King said, "It is my hope that after 44 years, the family of Karen Umphrey can breathe a little easier knowing her perpetrators have been brought to justice." Sheriff King also read a statement prepared by the family of Karen. The statement read, "After 44 years of wondering what happened to our beautiful sister, we finally have our answer thanks to the detective work of Detective Ed Silver and the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office. We will forever be grateful to him and the entire staff of the St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office." Prosecutor Amy Goodrich did an excellent job of presenting the evidence to the jury and received the results we have been waiting for decades. Not only was this senseless crime absolutely heartbreaking and a life-changing incident for our family and friends, the accusations and suspicions towards her boyfriend, Fred Hill, over the years had a very negative impact on him, his family, and we sincerely hope that Fred can finally find peace. To all the families amongst all the slayings, we hope and pray that you find the justice that we finally received. Miracles do happen. Harris is scheduled to be sentenced on November 12th, and Laming is scheduled to be sentenced on November 18th. Both face up to life in prison. A 19-year-old woman disappeared from her village in Illinois in 1979. Almost half a century later, the case has finally been solved thanks to DNA evidence. On March 29, 1979, Kathy Halle left her home on Volks Court in North Aurora while on her way to pick up her sister from a nearby shopping center. On her way there, she disappeared. Initially, the police investigated the case as a missing persons case. That was until 3 weeks later, when Kathy's body was discovered in the Fox River on April 24th. After years of investigations, the authorities determined that there was not enough evidence to identify a suspect, and the case went cold. It was not until 2020 that the authorities revisited the case after linking DNA from Bruce Lindahl to the slaying of another woman named Pamela Maurer. The North Aurora authorities used new forensic technologies to connect DNA evidence found on Kathy's clothing to Lindahl's DNA collected while solving Pamela's case. In October 2024, Detective Ryan Peet from the North Aurora Police Department said, Lindahl has been connected to several other cases in this area from that time frame. With this new evidence, along with the evidence from similar cases involving Lindahl, we are able to conclude Lindahl was responsible for the slaying of Kathy Halle. Lindahl, who would often go to the shopping center where Kathy worked, was believed to have abducted her from the parking lot of her apartment complex, and he then drove her to the area where her body was later discovered. Before Lindahl could be charged with Kathy's slaying, he lost his life in 1981, while allegedly committing another slaying in Naperville, Illinois. Deputy Chief Joe Gorski read a statement on behalf of the Halle family, who were present at the news conference, saying, "While revisiting this case has been incredibly difficult, we are deeply grateful to finally have closure after 45 long years. Thanks to advancements in DNA technologies and groundbreaking tools, we are hopeful that other families will not have to endure the same pain and uncertainty that we faced for so many years." In the late 1980s, the residents of a small Fairview County town in Danbury, Connecticut, were terrified of becoming the next victim of a series of crimes that struck their town. Women and girls feared for their lives, scared that they could be the next victim of the kidnapping and brutal assault. The series of crimes happened in the area of Lake Avenue and Merrimack Street. Decades after the disturbing crimes, the investigators were finally able to positively identify one suspect due to new resources that were not available back in the 1980s. In 1989, one of the victims was an 11-year-old girl. She was kidnapped and assaulted. The initial investigation started on April 23, 1989. Danbury police responded to a complaint at the victim's residence in the city's Lake Avenue and Merrimack Avenue neighborhood. The girl woke up sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. to a masked young man covering her nose and mouth while holding a knife to her throat. The girl was asleep in the living room of her home with two of her brothers nearby when two suspects picked her up off the couch she was sleeping on and carried her out of the house. Once they were outside, she said the two individuals put her on the ground, lifted her to her feet, and told her to walk. The girl said that she did as they said, and she started to walk, with the two suspects behind her. One of them was holding a knife to her back. They brought her to an under-construction residence on Merrimack Street, where they forced her inside at knife point. They instructed her to go to the second floor of the building, where she was forced to undress and lay down on a plywood subfloor. The victim told the police she was repeatedly assaulted by the masked assailant, while the other held a knife to her head. During the initial investigation, the girl described the masked suspect as a white, heavy-set male who was about 5 feet 8 inches tall. The other suspect was described as a white male with a skinny build, yellow wavy or curly hair down to his neck, and approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall. After she was assaulted multiple times, they forced her to get dressed. They threatened to end her life and her mother's if she told anyone about what happened. They then walked her back to her residence, where she said they instructed her to go back inside through the rear door, and then they fled on foot. Sometime after returning home on that morning of April 23rd, the girl told her mother what happened. Her mother contacted the Danbury Police Department, and the girl was taken to the Danbury Hospital for examination and an assault evaluation. The investigators determined that the suspects had entered the victim's home through an opened kitchen window, and they obtained fingerprints from its exterior. They also found wood shavings on the couch in the living room, where the victim had been sleeping the night of her abduction, as well as on the floor next to the couch and in the victim's hair. The police located the under-construction home on Merrimack Street and found the structure consistent with the victim's description of where the assault occurred. The victim was later taken to the location where she identified the second-floor location of the assault, and investigators found wood shavings consistent with those found in her home and hair at the site. The investigators also found and collected a small puddle of evidence, including blood, in the area where she said the assault occurred. The evidence was submitted to the Connecticut State Forensic Laboratory for testing in 1989, but no suspects were identified at the time, and the case went cold. 3 decades later, in November 2023, the victim inquired about the case. the department's Special Victims Unit decided to reopen those files and approach the attacks with fresh eyes and new technology. Danbury police said that they requested a re-examination of evidence and got a hit in February 2024, linking 54-year-old David Coffey's DNA to that found in the blood mixture and other evidence collected from the Merrimack Street residence in 1989. They secured a warrant charging him with kidnapping in the first degree, and Coffey was arrested on October 22nd. Based on the results of recent DNA testing from the evidence seized in 1989, the police said that they believe Coffey was the masked suspect. Coffey was 17 years old in April 1989 and lived within close proximity of the crime scene related to the investigation. His home on Peace Street at that time was only about 600 feet away from the victim's residence. Coffey came up as a matching DNA profile through the CODIS system. He is a convicted felon and is currently on parole for felony charges out of the state of Georgia. His status as a parolee followed an 8-year prison stint for aggravated battery and firearm possession in June 2013. He was released from prison in November 2022. Following the DNA hit linking Coffey to the evidence, the authorities obtained a new DNA sample from the victim and had it sent to the Connecticut State Forensic Laboratory for analysis for comparison purposes. The lab also used new technology that was not yet available in 1989 to examine swabs collected during the victim's assault examination and samples of the evidence found inside the Merrimack Street building. It was through that testing and analysis, the police said that a match to his DNA profile was determined. A comparison performed in July 2024 of the fingerprints lifted from the window of the victim's home in 1989 to those obtained from Coffey during a past arrest came back inconclusive. Though the warrant for his arrest alleges that he assaulted the victim, he has not been charged with assault. While there are exceptions depending on the age of the victim and other factors, Connecticut's statute of limitations for felony assault generally is 20 years. Because he was 17 at the time of the alleged crimes, his case was initially filed in juvenile court and later transferred to adult court. Coffey remains held on a $750,000 bond at the Bridgeport Correctional Center and is set to appear in State Superior Court in Danbury on November 20th, 2024. The police have not yet identified the second suspect and have asked for the public's help to identify him. The authorities released the original composite sketch of the second suspect from 1989. They are continuing to investigate several similar crimes that happened in the late 1980s, and they are asking anyone with information to come forward. They are asking people who might know something about the incidents to call Detective John Bazile at 203-797-4668, the Danbury Police Investigative Services Bureau at 203-797-4662, or the anonymous tips line at 203-790-TIPS 8477.